Whether you own a condominium now or are thinking of buying one, how do you know if the association has enough money in its reserves? That's a complicated question. In this video, I'll explain how you can determine whether the association is socking away enough money to maintain its buildings and its common areas. If you clicked into this video, I'm guessing you already know what a reserve account is. But just in case, a reserve account is basically a savings account that a condominium association or a homeowners association maintains for future repairs, replacement, and improvements of its buildings and its common amenities. Common amenities include things like a community pool, parking lots, clubhouse, gatehouse, things like that. Things that all of the people who own a unit in there own a part of. Ideally, an association revisits their budget every year and has what's called a reserve study done every 5 years or so to evaluate whether or not they're collecting enough money on a monthly basis to pay for not only their ongoing operating expenses, but also to save money for future repairs and replacements. Recently, there was a change in Florida laws that are now going to require associations with buildings that are 3 stories or higher, such as the River Dance condominium that you see behind me, that's on the Manatee River in Bradenton, Florida. Those condominiums are going to have a milestone inspection report done to evaluate their buildings and all their common elements, and also have a structural integrity reserve study done that will take the results of the milestone inspection and determine whether or not the association is putting enough money away to maintain its building and its common areas. This law will be in effect December 31st, 2024. So if you want to know more about that law change, watch my video called New Condo Laws 2022. There's some very important information in that video that if you are a condominium owner or thinking of buying one, you need to know. It should be no surprise that older condominiums, such as the one behind me called Point Pleasant, built in the 1920s, located in the city of Bradenton, Florida, are going to be in need of more repairs and component replacements than will newer condominiums. To complicate matters even further, owners of these older condominium units, up until the most recent legislation change that I just mentioned, have been able to waive reserves for component replacement and repair. And they've done so for decades to keep condominium fees low and to avoid assessments. But as you can imagine, that has a snowball effect. And when the component does come up for the time it needs to be repaired, there's not going to be money available. So the associations have to come up with money somehow, either by raising fees or by an assessment to the unit owners. In addition, after December 31st, 2024, they will not have the ability to waive reserves for the necessary component repair and replacement. So if you currently own a condominium or you're thinking of buying one in a community where they haven't had a milestone inspection done or a reserve study, how do you know if they have adequate reserves? As I mentioned earlier, that is a complicated question. The only thing I can tell you is what I do as a real estate professional when I'm working with a buyer who's thinking of buying a condominium. Naturally, the first thing we do is go and take a look at the interior of the unit they're considering. Problem is, the buyer gets all excited about the inside of the unit and forgets that they're also buying a percentage of all the amenities that the other unit owners share. And they forget that they need to take a look at the condition of those amenities when they're considering their purchase. So as their realtor, I make sure that we make a visual inspection of the entire condominium community. Often, inadequate maintenance is glaringly obvious. I have seen it all. I've seen potholes in parking lots, rotting wood on lanais or staircases, wobbly handrails. I've seen old roofs. I've seen overgrown landscaping and inadequately maintained ponds and bodies of water. You name it. But the condition of many of the commonly owned components is not going to be glaringly obvious. Many of the mechanical components should be inspected by the appropriate licensed professional. And as the realtor, I would advise a potential buyer to talk with their home inspector about that. The next thing I do when I'm working with a buyer of a condominium is I obtain a copy of the complete, most recent financial statements for the association. And I also ask for the last 12 months of the meeting minutes for the board of directors for the association. Now, I usually get the financial statements, but I almost never get the meeting minutes. And the meeting minutes are really great to have because when you do get them, they tell you what repairs and improvements the owners are currently talking about and may give you a clue if there's an upcoming fee increase or assessment. But in the financial statements, you'll see a reserve schedule. And on the reserve schedule is an itemized list of the components for which they are reserving money for future repair or replacement. For each component on that schedule, there should be an estimated remaining life for that component, the approximate money it will take to repair, replace, or improve that component at the end of its economic life, and how much money they are reserving each month for that component. So without a reserve study, question is their estimate of the future repair cost or replacement cost accurate? Is their estimate of the remaining economic life accurate? If you're one of those people who's lucky enough to have expertise in that area, you'll probably either get a comfort level or you won't. For the rest of us, it's just going to be a guess. And it may be advisable to talk to the members of the board of directors and find out how they came up with those numbers. And another document that's contained in the financial statements is the balance sheet. And on the balance sheet, you should have a lump sum number of the amount of reserves that are currently on deposit for that association. So say, for example, that number is $300,000. So you have $300,000 on deposit, and say there are only 20 units in the association. Well, that means that they have $15,000 per unit in reserves for that community. And depending on the age and the quality of the components they have, that may be a comfortable number. If, however, that $300,000 is all they have on deposit for a community that has 200 units, that means they only have $1,500 per unit. That could be problematic, and it's worth investigating if you're a potential buyer by speaking with the board of directors or even the seller. If you are lucky enough to own or be buying in a community that has a reserve study, you'll notice that the reserve study evaluates the amount of reserves in terms of percent funded. A community that's 100% funded has adequate reserves for all of the anticipated repairs and replacements when they become due. 100% funded communities are very rare. I look for communities that are at least 70% funded. Anything less than 70% funded, and an owner or a buyer can expect that there will be fee increases and or special assessments down the road. Now, less than 70% funded may be an acceptable situation to a potential buyer, depending on their personal goals and depending on what kind of deal they got on their purchase price, right? So it's all relative, but it should be evaluated by owners and by potential buyers. Be sure to watch my video, New Condo Laws 2022, to get more familiar with the required milestone inspections and structural integrity reserve studies that will be a fact of life as of December 31st, 2024, and will have an impact on communities that have buildings 3 stories or more, especially if they're located within 3 miles of the coastline. Until then, see ya.